Hello everybody. We are going to chat really briefly today about the other Flavius Josephus quote, the James quote. That's James, the brother of Jesus, is supposed to have been mentioned in book 20 now of Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews. I'm going to tell you how actually that's not what happened here in the that this testimony, the second testimony, is a very brief addition to a piece of text involving priestly succession. And there is a James that's mentioned, but there's also a Jesus that's mentioned, Jesus, son of Damnaeus, who is likely the brother that is being referenced here, and the called Christ basically is added in as a marginal gloss in a margin. It's like a marginal note that's probably been added in by a scribe in later generations. We don't know exactly when, but it was probably reasonably early. But this is, it's very interesting, and it's not again, if we discount the testimonium, which I think is very easy to do these days, what we get is this is an example here of a very brief marginal note that again Josephus would not have said. He wouldn't have said called the Christ, or who was called Christ, and so on. So I'm just going to read this little essay with the which I was helped along with by ChatGPT. I've actually written quite an extensive article on this, which went into my book. This is just the Cliff Notes edition, if you like an annotated edition for you. Also, the title is Reassessing the Brother of Jesus called Christ in Josephus, a Bayesian and textual analysis abstract. This paper evaluates the passage in Antiquities of the Jews 2200 by Flavius Josephus, which refers to a James, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. This study considers the hypothesis that this phrase is a Christian interpolation, and that the James executed by the Sanhedrin was in fact James, son of Damnaeus. Through textual analysis, historical context, and a Bayesian probability model incorporating the suspect status of the Testimonium Flavianum. This is interesting here. We estimate a 99.84 probability that the phrase called Christ was a later addition, and that the original text had no reference to Jesus of Nazareth. Now, it spat these numbers out after I asked it to model the probability of this being Jesus of Nazareth, and that's what it came out with. And I was surprised, honestly. I didn't think it would be that lower probability of it being fraudulent. But so here we go, the introduction. The passage in question is really hot today, sorry. I had to close my windows because it's quite loud outside. The passage in question from Antiquities 29.1 or 2200, depending on the indexing, reads, He, Ananias, assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others. So this James is mentioned very briefly. There's no other context. There's nothing at all suggesting that he's the brother of Jesus, apart from the name Jesus, who is called Christ, and that's it. This has long been cited as extra biblical evidence of Jesus' existence. However, some scholars propose that this phrase, who was called Christ, it's like three small words in Greek, as it is in the interlinear, I think, is a later Christian interpolation, and that the James mentioned is actually James, son of Damnaeus, not James, the brother of Jesus of Nazareth. A narrative context following the execution of James. Josephus notes, King Agrippa took the high priesthood from Ananias and gave it to Jesus, the son of Damnaeus. So this is quite a long passage, and it's about priestly successions This was a pretty common practice to give someone who was smited or badly treated or deposed and so on, to give it to one of their brothers if they were found to have been, if the title was found to have been taken from them unfairly. So it's happened quite often. The proximity of these names, James and Jesus, son of Damnaeus, implies a familial or narrative connection. This fits better if James was the brother of Jesus, son of Damnaeus, suggesting the entire episode concerns high priestly politics and nothing to do with Christianity. And of course it doesn't have anything to do with Christianity on the face of it. And the Christianity is not mentioned. A new messianic cult or whatever is not mentioned. Nothing is mentioned. James is just mentioned in passing, and some others. We don't even know if the some others are connected to James. Problems with this phrase called Christ. Parenthetical style. The phrase appears syntactically as an interruption, not organically part of the sentence. Again, why would you call him just called Christ? And why not? Why would Josephus not try and elaborate? Because the Christ is not a term familiar to Greeks. Really, this was a messianic, anointed one. Wasn't familiar to Greeks in this time period, and he's talking to Greek people, not Christians. So the lack of explanation. Josephus never clarifies what Christ means, despite it being a loaded term. No Christian context. The accusation is legal, not theological. There's no mention of Christ, beliefs, resurrection, or a sect. For the Testimony of Flavianum, TF, this early passage in antiquity, the earlier passage, in 1863 to 64, the one we talked about the other day, refers to Jesus in overtly Christian terms. Scholars widely consider it partially or wholly forged, as I do. If Josephus did not write the TF, it is suspicious that he would refer to Jesus again in 2200 without any context or explanation. It's very important. Estimated probability that the TF is interpolated, so 80%. This impacts our prior probability that any Christian reference in Josephus is genuine. Of course, the Bayesian analysis, we define H1, the phrase, it's not worth going into, but this is what ChatGPT said. And I'm surprised the phrase, who was called Christ, is interpolated, and the James in question is the brother of Jesus, son of Damnaeus. You can check out the whole thing for yourself. It's worth reading. It's only about maybe a 30 or 40 second read. Priestly succession, so 99.84%. The familial high priest and appointments in the first century, appointing brothers, sons, or other close relatives as high priest, was a common political practice during the Herodian and Roman periods. Josephus documents many cases where brothers or sons of former high priests were installed in office. Examples: Ananus, Eleazar, Simon, son of Boethus, Jonathan, and Theophilus, brothers who served as high priests. So thus, if Jesus, son of Damnaeus, was executed unjustly, James, son of Damnaeus was executed unjustly, Agrippa, appointing his brother's son, Jesus, son of Damnaeus, as high priest would have been an expected political maneuver, not a theological response. This strengthens the reading that the narrative is priestly and not Christian. The conclusion: our analysis suggests overwhelming likelihood, approximately 99% plus, that the phrase called Christ in Antiquities 2200 is an interpolation. When removed, the narrative becomes internally coherent. And there are so many data points and little nodes here that we can discuss further, but I won't do that today. So this second reference, and so many Christians believe this is a powerful testimony to Christ here, that this James character mentioned in passing had anything to do with Jesus at all. Now, very quickly, there is a letter, an epistle of James and Jude So Jude and James are supposed to be brothers. Neither of them, the epistles themselves, say that they are the brothers of Jesus Christ. Just out of in passing here, I'll just tell you that. And this epistolary Christian layer, if you want, this wave of Christianity comes before the Gospels, and that Jesus is stripped down monumentally and is basically a celestial God from what we can read in the epistles. And there are 6 or 7 different epistles, and all of them talk as Jesus as a high creational spirit, like on the right hand of God himself, and as never really having been incarnated on earth. This is confusing to a lot of people, but there's a lot of evidence for that. So I'm just going to leave that there. So the James, Damnaeus, the Jesus son of Damnaeus. Again, this connection here has been made by Christians on the strength of 3 words, or called Christ. And it's most likely a marginal gloss that was just put into a text after it had been sitting there for a while. And Christians are known to have done this. There is evidence that the marginal glossolalia was incorporated into many texts. So anyway, I'll leave that there for you, and have a nice one, guys. I hope you're enjoying these videos. Take care. Bye.